morning. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I'm the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Growth Basics for Business, a monthly breakfast seminar series which provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself workplace solutions and insightful, actionable tips. Today is the first event in the 2024-25 season of Growth Basics for Business, and I want to thank Eaton Peabody Attorneys at Law for their continued support of this virtual event series again this season. This morning's topic, The Anatomy of a Sales Call, is presented by Pete Nikitas, founder of Cribstone 360. Today, Pete will unpack the real anatomy of a sales call, from controlling your narrative to mental prep, along with specific action items utilized by the best sale minds in every marketplace. Those attending today's event will walk away equipped to build a sales platform by scaling your sales team without hiring, learning how to sell with your ears, enlisting your clients to evangelize, crafting your sales pitch, conquering the objection, and making a sales effort part of everyday life. Like all the Chamber's virtual signature events today's presentation is free and is being recorded. It will be made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Now, before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance virtual events. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for our presenter today, you can type them in the YouTube chat. They'll be relayed to Pete throughout the presentation, and we'll also save time for Q&A at the conclusion of the event. Now, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor for Growth Basics for Business, Eaton Peabody. For over 7 years, Eaton Peabody has been the presenting sponsor of this series, and they've continued their support this season. Eaton Peabody is a full-service, Maine-based law firm with nearly 50 attorneys, serving Maine clients from offices in Augusta, Bangor, Ellsworth, and Portland. They assist companies of all sizes in a variety of industries. So whether you're an established financial institution or a small business taking just the first steps, they can help you with all your legal needs. To learn more about the services that they provide and the industries that they serve, please visit their website, eatonpeabody.com. Also be sure to follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on legal updates and future community events. Now, lastly, before we move into the program today, I'd like to give you a little bit more information on our presenter. Today's presenter is Pete Nikitas, principal at Cribstone 360. A Bates College graduate with a degree in economics, Pete established a manufacturer's rep firm serving the institutional pipe, valve, and fittings industry in the Northeast. After selling to his partner, he was hired by Fidelity Investments and served for 21 years as an institutional sales executive. Pete's unique combination of entrepreneurship and corporate assignments span 40 years and over 50,000 client interactions across various industries. That library of experience is the foundation of Cribstone 360, his results coaching consultancy. Now, you've heard enough from me this morning, so let's have a listen. Pete, take it away.
Terrific, Rachel. Thank you very much for what's clearly a great introduction. And thank you to you and everybody at the Chamber for having me here as part of the Business Growth Basics series. This will be divided into sort of three phases here. The first will be to address this narrative that exists in the universe around sales and salespeople. The second will be to build a platform that anybody can use to put a sales effort on top of. And then we'll finish with what should actually take place once you're in the middle of a sales call or an interaction. So, for openers, my thing here is all about finding a way to control your narrative. And the best way I guess I can explain that is that there's a bugaboo in the world about salespeople, whether it's as a score mentor or in my consultancy or helping people in the chamber. We constantly hear things like, well, I don't want to sound too salesy. I don't want to be too pushy. And this narrative exists out there. And here's a little anecdote as to how I think that thing, why it manages to persist. I'll go back to when my son, who's now 33, was in 4th grade. He asked me to come to career day and talk to his class about what it's like to be a salesman. And I did that, mumbled through whatever I had to mumble through. And then I got home that night and he had an envelope of thank you notes from all these kids. And the first one said, "My mom says that salesmen are pushy, but you seemed nice. Thanks for coming to class." The second one said, "My dad says that salesmen lie to get you to buy things." And the third one said, "We hate," underline, "we hate salespeople at our house because they always call in the middle of supper. We fixed that with the do not call list, so we don't have that problem." But, if you think about it, those kids who were in 4th grade were being fed a narrative by their parents. And then you fast forward to today, those people, those 4th grade kids are all 33. They're in the workforce doing their thing. Their parents are minus plus 60 years old. And this is kind of this narrative that exists. And I think the first thing that we have to do is sort through that a little bit. And I would tell you, salesmen are not pushy. Pushy people are pushy. Salesmen are not liars. Liars are liars. Anybody tuned in here can think of an experience that they had when someone told them a fib or a lie. You don't broad stroke an entire swath of society that way. We've all had people who are a little aggressive in their ask. We don't say that all painters are pushy and liars. So it's important to kind of get through your head that that narrative is really not. And if you had, I think here's the real point. If you can point to an experience that you had with a salesman, and you feel as though that salesman was pushy or they were a liar, you were dealing with a journeyman. And the title of today's presentation is The Anatomy of a Sales Call, Journeyman or Professional. If that's the way you were treated and that's the way you felt, then I submit that you were dealing with a journeyman, not a professional. Shame on them. And we're going to move into what it takes to be a professional here. So what I've tried to do, and I think professional salesmen do, is live by a different narrative, which is something that Henry Ford understood. One of his famous quotes was, "Nothing happens until someone sells something." And what Ford knew from the get-go was that if his sales effort wasn't successful in getting folks to move towards travel by internal combustion, he was going to have a warehouse full of rusting iron, and we'd all be going to the supermarket today in a horse and buggy. He understood intuitively that sales is the tip of the spear. Okay, that's the face of the organization. People are going to make a judgment about you based on how you conduct yourself in that function. People are going to make a judgment about the organization that you're representing based on how you conduct yourself in that interaction. Are you behaving like a journeyman, or are you behaving like a professional? So let's just assume that we kind of get through that, and you're buying into this whole bit about the criticality of the sales function and how vital it is, and frankly noble. I can tell you, I had a long career at Fidelity Investments, and they did not suffer people who were liars. They did not suffer people who were pushy. They hired and trained professional sales folks, and we all deserve that kind of exposure. So we will skip this. You heard the lovely introduction that Rachel gave. That's yours truly. So when I'm working with somebody, the first thing I try to do is understand where the motivation comes from. Like, what are you, when you put your feet on the floor in the morning, are you motivated by the fear of failure? Like, my gosh, if I don't get something done today, something bad's going to happen to my job or my company. Or are you motivated by the rewards of success? I've been in both columns. It's natural to toggle back and forth. Fear of failure is a rough place to be. It's like running a marathon, but carrying another body over your shoulder. It takes more work. Physiologically, it's bad for you. Your stress levels go up. You generate cortisol. You're fatigued. You're nervous. You start to behave, in some cases, like a journeyman. You may make promises you can't keep. You may cut deals that you shouldn't cut, all because you've got this anxiety, like if I don't get this done today the right way, something really bad is going to happen. That's a rough way to live. It's rough for your stakeholders, your clients, your spouse. We have to find a way to shift over to the rewards of success. And the folks who are there, I think this is also another differentiator between the journeyman and the professional. The professional understands a bunch of things. First, they understand the feeling. How do we feel when we put up a win? Again, physiologically, when you succeed in that interaction or that sales call, your brain produces dopamine and endorphins, and you feel great, and you get accolades. But it goes beyond that. There's you also understand that when you were successful, that other people in the organization reap that benefit. If you go back to what Ford said, which is nothing happens until someone sells something, when a sale is successful and it goes through and it commercializes and it creates revenue, other people in the organization draw paychecks and support families. And the true professional understands that and takes that responsibility very, very seriously. And then finally, the reward of success, that's when the paycheck comes in. The journeyman leads with wondering, how much of a commission am I going to generate right here? They're into it for the bump and run. The professional understands this whole host of other benefits to conducting yourself professionally. And the very last piece that falls into place is the financial compensation part. Okay, so we've got our new the new paradigm. We understand that we're the tip of the spear. We're in a good spot. We've got proper motivation, and you jump out into the marketplace. And I'm sure there are some solopreneurs listening in today. And sort of by definition, the solopreneur, it can be a very lonely pursuit, right? One shirt to grab, one back to slap. And on any given day, when things don't go according to plan, you can feel lonely. You can get a little stressed out, and maybe you kind of slide over towards journeyman tendencies. The professional builds a PBOD, a personal board of directors. This is a group of people, small group of people. It can be formal, it can be informal. It's your choice. But these are folks who know you and know you very well. They're from different walks of life, different corners of the marketplace. And it's a little board that you have on speed dial, so that in the middle, in the fog of war, if something comes up that you weren't really prepared for, rather than panic, you know that if it's a banking question, you hit speed dial and you call Sarah and you tell her, hey, look, here's what's going on. I'd like to puzzle this out with you. If it's a tech issue, you've got a friend who's in the tech game who can help you through that. When you have this personal board of directors in your hip pocket, the loneliness factor goes away, and you go out every single day knowing that you are not an army of one, but that you have this team behind you. Personal board of directors, I commend that to anybody. So now for a nugget, I'll give you a little nugget here, if I can find. Here's nugget number one. Business is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. There are three things in the world that will tell us the truth: babies, alcohol, and the market. The market always tells us what we need to do next. The key is, are we listening to the market? You may disagree. You may not have the capacity, the bandwidth. You may not have the energy. But I would say, buck the market at your own peril. So one of the ways that you can actually listen to the market is by creating a client advisory board. And this is different than the personal board of directors. You go into your existing business and you identify maybe a half dozen clients who are bright people, who are connectors, who are from different walks of life, but understand your product and your marketplace. You gather them once for a 2-hour meeting. You're essentially asking them to consult to you for free. And these are very nuanced. For as many people who are listening to this, there'll be a little nuance to your own client advisory board. But if we're doing this with the idea of pushing growth, there'll be a very simple 5-point agenda. And the last item is always growth. And that's where you'll share with these clients sort of how the sausage is made, how you think you're going to grow over the next 5 years, where you think the opportunities and the challenges are. And then you ask them to beat up those assumptions. And they will uncover observations and thoughts and ideas that didn't occur to you as a solopreneur, just because that's what the world's all about, right? You're getting different perspectives from different people. This is when we mentioned how to scale, how to build a sales force without hiring one. If you have 6 people in a room and they're helping you figure out your growth path for the next 60 months, if that's what we want to call it, they're buying in, they're taking ownership of all of this. And the next day when they go into the marketplace, I can promise you they will evangelize for you. They will refer to you. They will send business your way. They'll be pumping your tires all the time. And if you repeat it 2 times a year, you've got a total of 12 salespeople out there singing your praises on a daily basis. So the client advisory board, absolutely critical. Now, when you are at your advisory board and out in the marketplace, it's important to remember that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should be using them in that proportion. And the art of selling begins with the art of listening. This is a huge point of failure for the journeyman. The journeyman tends to show up, spill his candy in the lobby, make the pitch, talk themselves in and out of business all in the same 5 minutes. The professional listens, asks good questions. When you do that, you'll learn more than you ever thought you wanted to do. And in the process of doing this, when you're asking these questions, and the conversation kind of feels like it's slowing down a little bit and you haven't heard enough, the simple hack is, that's interesting, tell me more. Next time you go to a cocktail party or a barbecue, try this. Ask a couple questions of somebody, and the experience that you're going to have is it'll be as though you asked them what time it was and they told you how to build a watch. People are very, very, very forthcoming. And sooner or later, that conversation in business, sooner or later, that will get to their pain point. And that's the moment that the professional has been waiting for. The client or the prospect discusses a pain point, and the professional is there to offer a solution. That's how this thing works. This is an absolute mandate. In an interaction, business, personal, professional, if they learned more about you than you learned about them, you lost. People have a value on their time. And let's make up a number, say it's $100 an hour, and they agreed to take the meeting, and you went in. If you choose to use your time talking about the score, the weather, or your vacation or whatever, that's fine. The meeting will be over, and they'll say, it was wonderful for you to come in. I really enjoyed meeting you. And they'll walk you to the door. And before the elevator door closes, he'll look at his assistant and say, next time that guy comes back or calls for a meeting, tell him he can come in on the 45th of never. It's critical that you learn more about them than they learned about you. You should tattoo that on the inside of your eyelid. Now we arrive at the point where folks say, okay, I got all that, but I'm not sure really what to say. And that's a huge stumbling block for a lot of folks, particularly first time out of the gate. And the good news is that's just all about wordsmithing. And it's something that all of us can master. I've got a great little hack for you. Wordsmithing, art of the power of 4. Write it, the W is silent. Write it, read it, refine it, repeat it. And there are 3 bodies that, if you're in a sales function, whether it's full-time professional or whether it's just a part of everything else that you do, there are 3 things that you need to have cold. You need to have the good old-fashioned elevator pitch. You need to have your talk track, and then you need to have your closing language. And I would submit that if you take each of those and you go through, write it, read it, refine it, repeat it 10 times for each of those, all of your apprehension about what to say will go away. And by the way, you can certainly, in certain interactions, have that in print in front of you. It humanizes you. And not everybody can stand up and speak extemporaneously. And if it's more comforting for you to have some notes written down when you go into a meeting or an interaction, go ahead and bring it with you. Wordsmithing, R4, write it, read it, refine it, and repeat it. Another one that we get is, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious about rejection or an objection. My suggestion is that you substitute the word invitation for objection. If you've been given the meeting and you're sitting down with someone to make your presentation, they know why you're there. If they had 0 interest, you would not be in the room. When you get to the point where it's time for them to start talking about or responding to your presentation, if you hear objection, that tends to skew negative, and you're on your heels a little bit. You're not really sure what to do. It isn't an objection. It's an invitation to engage. It's an opportunity to have a dialogue. And it's absolutely vital that you know your stuff cold, and you have to know your competitor's stuff, specifically the competitor, if we're in a sales interaction here, specifically the competitor that they're using. And that what you may be thinking about or fearing an objection is an invitation. You're there to challenge their status quo. They'll tell you, we buy them 100 at a time. They're orange. They come in cellophane. And if you take that as an objection, you kind of freak out a little bit. But there's a reason why you do yours differently, and you take them through that and help them see the value in all of that. So I would somehow get into your head. I no longer fear the objection because I don't even think there's an objection out there. It's an invitation to engage. Every interaction is a winner. The journeyman is easy to get rid of. You just either give him a tiny order, or you tell him to get out and he takes off, or you tell him he's not going to get anything and he just leaves and he goes on to, pollinate the next flower like a little bee. The professional understands that there are a few things that can happen. You can either get the order, you can achieve your objective, you can have the win. I would submit to you that if we're talking about sales and commerce, 80% of revenue generated in the marketplace comes after the fifth contact. So it's not all that likely the first time around that you'll achieve your success if you define that as getting the order. You can't leave the interaction or the sales call empty-handed. All you have to do is figure out why you didn't. And again, if they gave you the meeting, they understand why you're there. And most folks would be more than happy to do a little postmortem and explain it isn't time for us to make a change. The pricing isn't right. The quality, there's a quality issue, delivery time, whatever it happens to be, they'll explain to you why they can't make that move at that time. And then you adjust a little and you would say something to the effect of, well, I wonder if we couldn't leave the door open just a little bit. I have so much confidence in my idea, my goods, my services, that at some point in time, there may be an opportunity for us to work together. It doesn't have to be today. I'd like to be able to go back and explain to my folks what it would take to be seen in a more positive light or a better light by you, so that if that time comes where you need a switch, or even if it's a temporary thing, that we're prepared to take care of you, and we can be up and running with you in no time at all. If you have that type of a conversation with people, you may leave without the order, but you learn why you didn't, and you're able to adjust and be ready the next time. So that's sort of this platform. These are the things that are important to have, again, a stable platform that you can now stand on and go out and do your thing. If it's selling, I would submit that if it's time to level up your sales effort, you have to be pretty transparent about it. You have to put on your calendar when you're going to be going out and creating business and doing business development, and you need to share it and own it. If you're all by yourself, then share it with a partner or a spouse, a little bit of accountability there. If you have other people in your organization, they should be able to see on your shared calendar where your business development efforts are. It's critical that we do one more. That's what separates the journeyman from the professional. The journeyman does the bare minimum amount to get by and buy Franks and beans for his family. And the professional sits back and says, well, if in my ecosystem, people sell 4 times a day, then I need to do 5. If they do 8, then you need to do 9. And you won't notice a difference after a day, and you won't notice a difference after a week, and you won't notice a difference after a month. But we live a life that's governed by the law of large numbers. And if you're doing 10%, 20%, 50% more interactions than your competitors, then in months 6, 7, 8, 9 through the end of the year, you'll see your opportunities grow exponentially, period, end of story. And as that starts to happen, you very, very quickly get so far ahead of the journeyman, they cannot catch you. Another little hack, carry your top 10 list of contacts that you want to have a meeting with. Maybe they're direct sales calls that you want to have. There should be 10 names, numbers, email addresses. Put it in your purse, put it in your pocket, put it on your computer. It has to be readily available. And here's why. You have a packed day, right? There's no white space left in a day. And all of a sudden you get a call that says, hey, your 2:30 appointment can't make it. It's very difficult on the fly. If your day is that packed, it's very difficult on the fly to figure out, how am I going to fill this next half hour or hour? And it's more likely, I can tell you what the journeyman does. The journeyman just goes home or goes bowling. Had appointment canceled, no big deal. The professional doesn't have to think about how to fill that spot. The professional opens up and sees name number 7 is someone I've wanted to call. haven't found the time to do it, this is the time to do it. You pick up the phone, you make your phone call or send the text, or do whatever you have to do. Must have your top 10 list. So there's your platform. We've got our motivation. We've fixed the narrative. We have our motivation. You've built a personal board of directors. You remember that Pete said that this is simple but not easy. We have to listen to the market. We've formed a client advisory board to do that. The client advisory board, our eyes and ears into the market. During interactions, we're listening twice as much as we talk. With respect to developing our elevator pitch, our talk track, and our closing language, R to the power of 4, there are no objections, just invitations, and you've committed. There's your sales platform. Now we get into sort of the anatomy of that sales call. What's physically going to happen when you're in front of that client or that prospect? And I'd submit that, particularly if you're a jack of all trades, master of none, you wear many, many hats in your organization, I'd submit that you have to take a moment and take a beat and stop. Actually, I just saw something come in here a minute ago. There's a question: how many hours per week do you actively sell versus research and prep? I'll give you one answer to that. I work with a fellow who is he just retired as a development director for a private school down in Connecticut, and he was trying to get his team up to speed, shall we say, level up a little, and talked about the need to prepare. For every meeting that he held, he would prepare for 5 hours, which blew my mind, by the way. And sort of his thing was, well, we may be asking for a check for $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 or more, and 5 hours of preparation doesn't even seem like enough. And if it's $100,000, then that's a lot of dollars per hour. So how many hours? Right, I think that's sort of dependent on the other things that go on in your life. But you'll see in a moment here inside the sales call when we talk about preparing. I'd look at it maybe just a little differently. I'd break it down and say, okay, I have to do a sales call on this individual. I've got to put in at least an hour, maybe 2, researching who they are, who their competitors are, who their vendors are for that 45-minute or 1-hour meeting. So maybe more on that in just a moment. So now it's time for us to go ahead and get into this sales mode. So I'd submit that it's time to stop. Take a beat. Forget about everything else that you're working on right now. You need to maximize the next hour of your life. Activate your senses. Be very, very cognizant of what you see when you get in there, what you hear, sometimes what you smell, depending on your industry, taste, touch. You have to be completely focused and in the zone when you're making the sales call, because you'll receive little cues, some subtle, some not so subtle. Very, very important to listen, okay? As you listen, an opportunity is going to be presented to you. Someone's going to talk about some pain. At that moment, you make your presentation. You execute. You make your presentation on how you can stop that pain, and then you stop. They've told you what the issue is. You've developed a solution and presented a solution. Then stop. That's what the journeyman. That's what the professional does. The journeyman will continue to talk right through the order after, just for whatever reason, and they'll talk themselves right out of the order. So step number 1, we have to stop. Activate, listen, execute, stop. Call's over. All right. Now you're inside. You're ready to walk through the door. You're thinking about this sales call, and this may, Riley, this may speak to what your question was. Begin with the end in mind, right? What is it that you want to achieve in this interaction? Sometimes it's an order. Sometimes it's the second meeting. Sometimes it's just to introduce an idea that you can kind of keep alive over a period of time. I would submit, again, the journeyman is only thinking about the order. Got to get in there, make my pitch, cut my price, get the order, get out. The professional is thinking about, how do I develop this thing as a relationship so that this can have a long life cycle that'll continue to send benefits to my organization for a long, long time. Phase 1, know what the end is before you go in. Phase 2, prepare like no human. The journeyman does not prepare. The journeyman doesn't see anything. The journeyman just knows they need to show up and throw up, get this story out in front of the guy. He'll either buy it or he won't. He moves on. The professional, like a cyber sleuth, LinkedIn, Insta, Facebook, Googling, got to know everything they can about their prospect, have to know everything they can about their competitors, everything that they can about their vendors. And you sort of store, this is a dossier that you've got. I print it, by the way, and have it in a folder. Maybe that's old school, maybe it's not. But you've got this dossier in your head before you walk through the door, and then you'll be able to key into something that you see or hear and find some common ground. But you have to have that library in your head to be prepared for that, because then it's time to bond. You find the common ground. If you haven't done any preparing, there's no way you can bond. So, and it can be something simple as you see something on the wall, or someone you happen to know on LinkedIn that you folks went to the same school, or your kids went to the same school. You have a little conversation up front about that. That's how we bond. You can AI me all day long. People always buy from folks that they trust and that they like. And we get to that point by bonding and building a little relationship. This is where it starts to get interesting. Now you have to stir the pot. Back to our friend, the journeyman. He walks in, he's probably 5 minutes late for the meeting, walks in. Hey, how you doing? Did you see the Red Sox last night? I've got this product and I'm running a special right now. I'm 30% cheaper than everybody else in the marketplace. That doesn't have anything to do with what's going on with that client or prospect. Nothing. You're going to ask some questions. You know what business you're in. Maybe you're in the mobile canning business and you're calling on a brewery. I'm making this up pretty quick here. You know where some of the pain points are in that. So you ask a few questions. How's it working with your local guy? Do you ever run into a situation where they're late or they're delayed by a couple of days? And it'll sooner or later get around to the point where, yeah, we cut it a little close. Sometimes they get it just in time. And then you're able to present your solution. There's a reason why that doesn't happen with your organization. You're either overstaffed or you've got plenty of extra trucks or whatever it happens to be. But you need to have the client identify their pain point in order for you to present a credible solution. And that only happens when you've managed to stir the pot. Once that's done and you've stirred it and they've started talking, you got to stop. Journeyman will blast his way right through this thing. The pro will listen. The professional will listen. Let them get it out. You make your presentation. Then it's time to get the order to land the plane. A lot of times journeymen will leave before they get to that part because they forget or they don't know how. The professional, going back to art of the power of four, has their closing language all committed to memory. It's second nature. And it gets to that point in the presentation where you have to land the plane. You have to ask them, are they ready? Is this the right time? When would be the right time? I want to make sure that we're prepared for you when you're ready. Is this something you think you'd like to move on in October? Do you want to get this done by the end of the year? The better prepared I can be back at my place to service your needs properly, the better interaction the better experience we're going to have. We can work on commitment language. I do it all the time, but you can't leave. You've wasted all of this time and energy if you don't have good, comfortable commitment language. Okay, so there's your platform. We did our platform. We got through what happens inside the sales call. And here are a few brandisms that, to me, separate the journeyman from the professional. The professional will review and work his or her goals daily. You can't go back and see it once a week or once a month or twice a year. It doesn't work. This thing has to be, you have to nip away at this every single day. You got to smile, especially when you're on the phone. People can hear, I know we've said it 1,000 times before, people hear a smile over the phone. And fewer people are smiling, by the way, today than ever before. So you're a huge standout if you can get that done. Return your calls, emails, and texts. They talk if you don't. I don't know whether it's a pandemic thing or some kind of odd evolution, but the truth of the matter is folks just don't. I hear it all the time. Can't get anyone to return my call. They must be so busy. Good practice to be in would be maybe you do your callbacks or returns at 11:30 and 4:30, right before lunch, right before you knock off. If you've got folks in your organization, maybe they can prompt you to do some of that. Number 4, dress properly. They notice. I'm not saying that you have to have a chalk stripe suit on to go call on a brewmaster, but they'll notice if you get there and the cuff is frayed or there's a little stain on your shirt. They're wondering if you can't take care of the small details in your life, how are you going to take care of the small details in theirs? Never bash a competitor. That's free advertising. The journeyman constantly bashes the competitor. The professional applauds the competitor if it gets brought up. Language around that is, we've been competing against them a long time. I have nothing but respect for them. They've got a great product. They've got their clients. We have our. And you just never bash it. You'll be relegated to journeyman status in a heartbeat. Be quick to apologize. There are problems every day. Period. End of story. It isn't the problem, it's the solution. And Mary Barra, by the way, CEO of GM, her admonition is the best time to acknowledge a problem as soon as you find out you have one. So the quicker you apologize, the faster things get better. It humanizes. People understand that mistakes happen, and you'll certainly be viewed more as a professional than a journeyman when you behave like that. Embrace your value as a salesperson. The lowest common denominator tends to be price. And the first, objection, if you will, tends to be price. Gee, Pete, you're priced 4% higher than your competitor. The journeyman says, you're right. Let me discount my price by 20%. Now you've just blown a hole in your ship. The professional knows enough about their product and the marketplace to say acquisition cost is 4% higher. But over the lifetime of the product or the life cycle of the product, cost of ownership is 20% less. And I let you keep that difference. So you can share that with your board or that with your manager. We may be 4% high up front, but we save you a bushel of money over time. You may have to reinforce your value proposition that you gave earlier in the presentation. Live to help. Journeyman doesn't really care about the prospect. Journeyman just wants to get out with the order, bump and run. When you live to help your client or your prospect or whoever you're in this interaction with, it's just another form of servant leadership. You're there to help them. You'll get paid last, but it'll always be more. Okay. There's a fellow who works for a local Chevrolet dealership up here. He's in his 40th year, 40 years as a car salesman, by the way. Talk about people that have an unwarranted bad reputation. He's now selling vehicles to the grandchildren of his customers. Wouldn't happen if he was pushy. Wouldn't happen if he was a liar. He's always there to help these people with whatever their needs are. Sometimes it takes a while, maybe a generation to come around. He gets paid last, but he doesn't have to discount like everybody else does. And he's created a total annuitized business over several generations. And then my last admonition to everybody here, whether it's a sales process or any other interaction that you're in, get up in the morning, be properly motivated, go out, do good, do better, and do more. And that's where I'm going to land my plane today. And I wish everyone who's tuned in today or whenever you happen to be watching this, nothing but the best success for all of your ventures. If there's anything I can do for you right here, feel free to type your questions in. If you've got questions in the future, I'm here for you. Anytime you need to get together and puzzle things out, Cribstone 360, I'm easy to find. And I thank all of you and certainly to the Chamber. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Pete. Just before personally, I have some questions for you, but before we begin with my questions, I think there's one more in the chat here.
Oh, let's see. I'm sorry. How can I begin building my personal board of directors if I don't already know people in relevant industries? Couple different things. I think you do know people in relevant industries, but just haven't really thought it through. If you're part of the chamber, you could certainly use them as a huge resource. and ask specifically for introductions. I know Rachel would be happy to introduce you to people. I know that Tommy Johnson would be happy to introduce you to people. You could certainly get with an organization like SCORE. They mentor as well, and they keep a list of folks across all industries. And if you really don't have folks in your network, and you were to get involved in something like a SCORE or an MCI or a CEI up in Brunswick, they exist to help connect you with mentors that could become part of that board of directors. I hope that helps.
That's a good answer. I mean, my next one was going to be, what resources have you used in your experience in the sales field, like throughout the years, that, or maybe it's technique, I should say, but resources as well, to make those personal board of directors, or, get those leads even on sales.
So are you asking me how I've built my personal board of directors?
First part of the question is yes, that, yeah. And then what resources you've used in your experience.
Yeah, so I have a client. I have a best friend from another industry. I use my sister, who's also an executive in healthcare. And again, maybe this is what's worked for me because I've banging around for 40 years, and some folks have only been doing this for 4 years. But you sort of, I don't know that it would be that nuanced, but if you made a list of the 3 or 4 things that you tend to rub up against that are little pain points for you, if you don't have direct contact with people in that business, you have people who can introduce you. And you'll be astonished by how much people want to help, even if it's just making an introduction to the type of people that you want to add to your personal board of directors. And then, Rachel, one more time, explain the second half of that question to me. What resources?
Yeah. So, just, looking at your experience, you owned a company and then you went and worked for with Fidelity Investments. I'm assuming, like, when you owned your company, you had to, like, find your own resources for leads and, building your book of business. And then compared to Fidelity, you were probably given resources to utilize in doing so.
So that's interesting, actually. In both careers, there was a finite list of organizations to communicate with, and you certainly had to knock on the door of places that were unfamiliar to you, or you were unfamiliar to them. But if you're in the industry, and maybe we could do a clinic on this, but if you're in a specific industry, it's not that tough to figure out who your client set should be. You've got to do a little research. You can go on, ChatGPT may be able to give you some leads. You can buy lists. What I think I might do is, if I had to start all over again from the beginning, I'd get into my LinkedIn profiles and figure out which ones of my contacts brush up against some of the businesses that I need to be in touch with, and ask for help there. There's this old model. It's a model called the advice model. And you would ask the question that you just asked me. You'd find a colleague or a peer or a LinkedIn connection and set aside 15 minutes to say, I'm trying to build a database of the people that I should be calling on. And there are some of the ideas that I have. What do you think? And they're going to either tell you it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. And it's probably not a bad idea. And they'll say, yep, that's exactly what you need to do. And then your response to that is, well, I see that you are, we both know what business that you came from or that you're in, and you're connected to some of these folks that I'd really love to be in front of. Would it be possible for you to make some type of an introduction, virtual introduction, a phone call, lunch, whatever level you're comfortable with? I just need to get this thing started. And today I'm asking you for help. When people come to you and ask for help, it's just human nature to say, yeah, let me find a way to help you. Was that sufficiently vague?
Yes. Yeah, no, that was great. That also kind of leads into my next question, like remembering, right, that we're human and like creating that human connection, because I feel, it's the sales world is intimidating, and it can be intimidating for some people of certain personalities. And I just wonder how, you handle those rejections or denials throughout your journey. I mean, throughout your career, over and over and over again, referencing back to the fact that you said, I think it was like the 80%, 80% of your sales come from like the fifth interaction with people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That just, I'm not in sales, so that's probably a good thing, but that sounds very intimidating to me. And I'm sure many people on the call or in this virtual event this morning were comforted by that statistic. Would you mind elaborating on how you've, handled rejection throughout your career?
Sure. First of all, you are in sales. Quincy Hensel has a small but mighty team of 6 people that create 70 to 80 events a year on behalf of the business ecosystem in the greater Portland area. Every one of you are in sales, and you're doing just fine. There's no such thing as rejection. If you find yourself in a spot where the most important thing that you have to reconcile is how to deal with rejection, then I would say go to a quiet place and think through your life. Rejection maybe is, if we're thinking about it in the sales world, rejection is you ask them to buy and they said no. Is that a rejection? Is that what you're talking about? The only time there's a true rejection is when you're trying to get in front of the prospect and they make it abundantly clear that you should never try to do that again. I guess I would call that one rejection. There's 330 million people in the United States. If someone doesn't want to meet with you, you can't get to the next person fast enough. So if you've been given the meeting or the opportunity, there isn't going to be rejection. They may say, I'm not going to buy from you, but put it in the context of your life. You didn't break a bone. You didn't get sick. You didn't get a man cold. I mean, it's not, you have to, if you can't get to a stage where you can process this thing that you call rejection, not everybody should be in this game. I just try to help folks understand that this rejection thing is a boogeyman that you've allowed to be created for you. But there are some techniques around that. Like if you think you're being rejected in that first interaction, the first thing you should do to be able to leave and save a little bit of face is, how do I keep this alive so that I can come back a next time? And there's language around that. I get it. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Timing's not right. You're loaded with inventory. I totally get that. That happens 4 or 5 times a day for me. We're going to be there for you. I would guess that 90 days from now, your inventory will have worn down a little bit. Can we leave the door open for 70 days? Maybe I give you a call and see if we get together and see if the situation has changed. People will let you off the hook. And that, so you've turned what you were concerned about there as rejection into your next opportunity to get to your second interaction. And if they didn't like you or trust you, they're going to say there's no need for that and whatever. I don't know what to tell you. That's part of being a grown-up, right? These things happen every single day. I wish there was a button I could press or a pill that I could give people to help them get over the fact that rejection is not life changing here. It's just part of what's going to happen during the day. So you say, if you believe that strongly in your product or your goods, your services, your idea, If you've tried everything and it's just not meant to be there, you need to get to the next opportunity faster than your competitor. And sooner or later, for most folks, if you practice that and you get through it, you become more comfortable with it and less aware of it and less fearful of it.
Yeah, I needed that little bit of a pep talk this morning. Thank you, Pete.
Call anytime. I can help you with all of that.
Thank you. One last little question here before we wrap things up. But in your experiencing mentoring other people in sales, what has been the biggest, at the forefront of people's challenges? Like, what is the biggest mountain that people feel they need to climb? And I'll kind of leave that open-ended.
Yeah. So earlier on in my career, we called it call reluctance. Over the past couple of years, I've heard the term imposter syndrome. And if you're a career sales professional, a career sales executive, you won't have imposter syndrome, but you'll go through cycles where, for whatever reason, you're over it, right? And I'm just not going to make that sales call today. But that's not insurmountable. You get it. You'll either go clean out your car, play around a golf, and get up the next day and do it. With a lot of the solopreneurs that I mentor and coach, this call reluctance thing in this imposter syndrome thing can be paralyzing, because so for most people, Rachel, they understand their product, their goods, their service. They designed it, they created it, they know it cold, they've got their lawyer lined up, they've got their accountant lined up, they've got everything lined up except for the clients. Because in their experience, they've never had to go out and get clients. And this applies to people, second, third, fourth career people, executives who've gone out and started their own company. They have everything squared away except the client. And the funny part, and I watch this on a daily basis, I watch people go back and re-engineer their product before they go out and make a sales call, because they've got this incredible call reluctance or this incredible imposter syndrome. And if you don't get over that or find a way to do it, you'll have a product that was rearranged 5 times and no revenue, and then you have to close. So sooner or later, you have to run out into traffic. And if you're bright enough and you have the capacity and the bandwidth to have created this great idea, you're certainly bright enough to go out and tell people about it. Certainly bright enough. You may need a little coaching. You may need to do a little R4. You may need to have a wingman or a wingwoman who can go with you. But it's odd that the sales part, which is the easy part, because it's just telling a story, compared to coming up with the idea of sea bags or whatever it happens to be. That's the tough stuff, the creative stuff, pulling together manufacturing, all that's the hard stuff. Telling the story, if you practice it, if you work with someone, a coach to help you get through it, you'll get over that. And you'll post wins like everybody else does. And then the endorphins come and the dopamine comes and you'll be off to the races.
Awesome. Well,
I make it sound pretty easy, don't I?
Yes, you certainly do. And I know that through my own experience in the professional world, sometimes you do have to walk into traffic and just get experience through action.
Chuck Noll once told Peyton Manning that one of the definitions of stress, you'll only feel stress when you don't know what you're talking about or you don't know what you're doing. And so you got to get that part squared away, and then the stress ebbs. And you go to traffic, you get hit, you put up a win, and rinse and repeat.
Thank you. I'll have those words like in the back of my mind for the rest of the day, probably for the rest of the week. That's I think, like you said, everyone works in sales, whether or not they realize they work in sales. And it really comes down to having those human interactions and making those connections and actually having a conversation and telling a story.
Amen.
No more negative connotation to the car salesman.
Perfect. Unless he earns it.
I'm sorry.
Unless he earns that reputation.
That's true. Like you said at the beginning of the presentation, sales people are not liars. Liars are liars, and salespeople aren't. Did you say mean or
pushy? Pushy people.
Pushy. Pushy people are pushy. That's true. Thank you again, Pete. This has been wonderful. Such an informative presentation this morning, and I love talking to you at the end. I was collecting these questions throughout the show, and I didn't want to insert myself. I wanted to let you give us some wisdom this morning, but additionally, you actually referenced him during the show, but I'd like to also thank my colleague, Riley Legier, for helping to produce yet another successful virtual event.
Thank you, Riley.
Yes, thanks, Riley. And thanks again to each of you for attending this morning and throughout the year. If you're interested in continuing the conversation with Pete and learning a bit more about Cribstone 360, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. That email will include contact information for Pete and his slide deck from today, so you can refer back to it. Another shout out to our sponsor, Eaton Peabody, for their support of this series. The Eaton Peabody Growth Basics for Business series is typically held on the third Tuesday of each month. Join us again next month on October 22nd for Safeguarding Your Brand's Reputation in the Age of AI, presented by TJ Winnick of Essex Strategies and Rebecca Emery of Seacoast AI. Together, they'll dive into the significant risks that emerging technologies pose to businesses of all shapes and sizes, and provide us with proactive measures and crisis management techniques to keep our businesses safe and resilient in an increasingly AI-dominated landscape. If you're interested in presenting at Growth Basics for Business or know of a business expert who may be interested, please visit our website, portlandregion.com, to submit an event proposal. Any questions, our team's direct contact information can be found there as well. So with that, thank you again for attending this morning's event, and have a wonderful rest of your day.